I'm Mike Halsey, and welcome everybody for diagnosing, repairing difficult problems in Windows 7. A big, in-depth topic that covers a lot of things that are in my book, Troubleshooting Windows 7, and we're here for the next hour. And I'll after the presentation, I'll try and take as many questions as I can. So, first of all, who am I? Well, I'm the author of the free Windows 7 Power Users Guide, which you can download from my website. Need to know Office 365 security, and the all-important Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out, which you can buy from the O'Reilly website or from Amazon in paperback and in all manner of ebook versions, including for the Kindle. I have got Windows 8 books forthcoming for later on this year that are all really secret but very exciting, and I'm a Microsoft MVP awardee for Windows Consumer. So today I'm going to talk through three sections: the fundamentals of troubleshooting, how we can do some advanced troubleshooting, and then we'll look at some of the power utilities available in Windows 7. Because despite the fact that Windows 7 is the most stable, reliable and secure operating system that Microsoft have ever produced, it does ironically come with more diagnosis, reporting and troubleshooting tools than any version of Windows before it. But I suppose one must come with the other. These lines sort of cross. When Windows wasn't reliable, particularly reliable or stable, it didn't come with any of these, and gradually these two lines have crossed over. Because we've only got an hour, and because this is such a big subject, then obviously I'm not going to be able to cover everything in full depth, but I want to be able to give you some insight into every aspect of it. And as I say, the book Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out contains all of this information in a tremendous amount of detail. So let's start with the first part of troubleshooting fundamentals. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, I mean, let's do some Sherlock Holmes investigation, because, as I say here, the key to an effective diagnosis is to determine what it is that isn't causing the problem. Because the things that aren't causing a problem are far more numerous than the things that are. And it's very easy to determine what it is that isn't causing a problem. And we'll have a look at some of these now. But as Sherlock Holmes famously said to Dr. Watson, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So let's have a look at the software side of this first. Now, you may know about safe mode. That when you start up Windows, if you press the F8 key or hammer the F8 key on your keyboard, well, not literally with a hammer, but if you press the F8 key on your keyboard, you can bring up the boot menu, and from this you can select safe mode. And safe mode is a special diagnostic mode within Windows where it doesn't load any of your drivers and it won't load any of your software, and it'll just be Windows, and you can just do diagnosis. But for a lot of things, safe mode isn't especially helpful, especially when it comes to diagnosing problems. But there is another one, and this is the safe boot mode. And you can turn this on and off through the msconfig panel. Type msconfig into the search box in the Windows 7 Start menu, and you'll bring up this panel. And you'll see there's a boot tab here, and there's a little tick box that you can turn on to activate this safe boot mode. You'll see it there. And there are different options underneath, but probably just ticking that box is fine on its own. If you select minimal, you'll actually get the full safe mode, which you don't want. Now, safe boot mode will load hardware drivers. It'll load your graphics driver, for instance. It won't auto run your software, or it won't load that. but it does give you a better diagnostic environment for Windows. If you suspect that it is a piece of software that is causing a problem and not a hardware driver, and I'll look at hardware drivers in a bit, then safe boot mode is where you want to be, because all of your software will run. Not all software will run in safe mode, and in this mode you can run each bit of software one at a time until you encounter a problem. Now, this process of eliminating things also comes into play when we look at the hardware. If you suspect, for instance, that there may be a physical hardware fault with your computer, then you want to eliminate all the extraneous hardware. So you could open up the side of your PC. If you have a desktop PC, it's very difficult with a laptop or an all-in-one PC, and I wouldn't recommend it in those circumstances. But with the desktop PC, you can unplug your DVD drive, you can unplug all but your Windows drive, you can remove all but one stick of memory, you can remove any extra expansion cards that you might have for a television tuner, and you can run the hardware in a minimal configuration. Now, there are two things with this. First of all, you need to work very safely. You need to make sure that you are properly earthed, that your computer is on a firm, level, flat surface, strong surface, and you need to make sure that when you're working inside your computer, it is, as I say, you are fully earthed and it is switched off. And the other thing with this is, if you've got, let's say for instance, you suspect there may be a memory problem, and again, there's more on memory problems in a little bit, you can try each memory card in your computer individually, one at a time, and just see if you get the problem. Now, where this comes in particularly useful is if you suspect there may be a hardware fault that's causing a power interruption. This is quite common, especially if your computer's a few years old, that your power supply may not now be providing all the electricity that your computer needs to run all of the hardware, so it may not be starting. So if you start unplugging things, if you unplug hard drives and unplug memory, then obviously what's left won't require as much electricity. So it's a good way, again, to determine whether or not your power supply in your computer needs to be replaced. And these things are very simple to replace and very cheap to replace as well. So these are two ways that we can eliminate what a problem is. The safe boot mode, which I'll just bring up again here for you. You run it through the msconfig panel, type msconfig into the search box in the Windows 7 Start menu, and remember, when you're finished with safe boot mode, you need to go back into msconfig and you need to untick that box and you need to turn it off. And then when you've turned it off, next time you reboot your computer, Windows will start normally. So, now that we've looked at that, let's have a look at some more advanced troubleshooting and advanced diagnosis, because some of these problems can be extremely complex. And we'll begin by looking at a Windows installation that simply won't start. Now, Windows 7 comes with a really good startup repair tool, which, if Windows won't start, should automatically run itself on the third or fourth time when the PC won't start. And this tool will look at all the files that are required to start Windows, and it'll try and make any repairs that it can. Now, these automated repair tools in Windows 7, all they will really do is reset Windows components to their default state. What they won't do is they can't rectify or get around any problems caused by a problem with a corrupt hard disk or partition, for instance, they can't get around any other problems. They're not intelligent that way. They just reset components to their default state. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But you can get to this through that boot menu that I mentioned a little while ago of pressing the F8 key on your keyboard after your BIOS screen disappears but before the Windows logo appears, which with modern computers, them being very quick, doesn't really give you a lot of time, so you need to sit there and stab it a bit. And if that doesn't work for you, and if in some computers it won't appear in that menu, you can start your computer from your Windows 7 installation DVD, and then when you get to the install screen for Windows 7, don't press install. Instead, down in the bottom left, you'll see an option to repair your computer. Now, when you go in to Startup Repair, it will initially try and automatically detect repairs. But sometimes it won't be able to do this, or sometimes you're going to want more options. Now, what's very likely is that Windows will Startup Repair will tell you that it has tried to repair problems and will restart. You can restart your computer, but you can press cancel at this point, and you can bring up a menu of other options that are available to you. So here we can see on this screen we have options to, again, run the automated startup repair, run Windows System Restore, which will roll your system back to a point before a bit of software or a bit of driver or Windows Update was installed, and you'd be surprised how many times a Windows Update can actually cause a problem. You can run a Windows System image recovery if you've created an image snapshot of your Windows installation. You can run a memory diagnostic. This is where I mentioned there was a memory diagnostic that you can run. Or for much more advanced work, again, there's something here I'm going to look at in a minute. There's the command prompt here, which we'll click on that slide, and we'll see that the command prompt is the last option. Now, this is the traditional DOS command prompt going back to the early 1980s. But there's all sorts of new things that you can do with it. Now, one particularly useful thing I find is a command called bootrec. Now, this is new. If you type bootrec, it'll launch the boot recovery environment, and in this boot recovery environment there are commands that you can use. You've got switches here, which you can see on the right of your screen there. Bootrec with these switches: fix MBR, will write a new master boot record for Windows; fix boot, rebuild the boot files; scan OS to look for any installed operating systems; and then you have the BSOD edit command. Now, the first two switches here are pretty much what the automated system repair is going to try and do on its own. Now, if you have problems, BSOD edit is worth looking up online. There's a lot of complex things that you can do with it, but it's just done through command line switches. So it's technical, but you can get to grips with it fairly easily. Now, the scan OS switch here is useful if no operating system is found, but you know it's there, and you can manually edit using BSOD edit your Windows 7 boot files, and you can tell it where your operating system is if there's a major problem. So that's bootrec is a very useful command. Then the system file checker is one of the most useful things in Windows, in my view. If you go on to the official Microsoft support website at support.microsoft.com, go into the Windows 7 section. There are 5 videos there that I have made showing you how to use things like the system file checker and how to repair boot files as well. As I say, they're in support.microsoft.com. Go into the Windows 7 section, and you'll see a link on the left-hand side for troubleshooting videos, and it shows you how to do this. Now, the system file checker will check every file on your computer that constitutes Windows and compare it against the original on your Windows DVD. Now, if it finds any that are changed or corrupt, then it will copy the original file back from the DVD. There are only two problems with this. First of which, you need a Windows DVD. And an awful lot of new computers aren't shipped with Windows DVDs. This is a big problem, and it's supposed to help combat piracy, but all it really does is inconvenience consumers. But there we go. What you need to do when you get a computer is you really do need to pester the company that you bought it from to actually get a Windows DVD. They're incredibly useful things to have. You never know when you might need to reinstall Windows from scratch. They may charge you a small administrative fee, say $10 just to ship it to you, but it's well worth having. The other problem with it is that if you have a service pack installed on your copy of Windows, you will need that service pack integrated into your Windows DVD. Fortunately, these days there are several pieces of software that can automate the process. When I originally wrote Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out, that none of these software packages existed, and I had to write the whole long process, which went on for about 10 pages. There's bits of software here, such as RT7 Lite, which you can download, usually for free, online, and which will integrate these service packs into Windows 7 for you. Currently, there is one service pack for Windows 7, and Windows 7 Service Pack 2 will probably be out nearer the end of this year, around about the launch of Windows 8. But what if you need more information about your computer to find out what's going on? So let's have a look at some of the ways we can really get information. The Problem Steps Recorder was included with the Windows 7 beta program, and it was so popular that by demand from beta testers, Microsoft kept it in the final version of Windows. But you won't find it in the Computer Management Console, you won't find it in the Start menu, you won't find it anywhere. The only way to get to it is to type PSR into the search box in the Start menu. But it's an incredibly useful tool. What it does is you can set it to record your system. It will take a screen grab whenever you click on something or whenever something changes on your screen or with your computer. And it will annotate that screen grab with information on what is actually happening with Windows and with your software at the time. Then when you're finished, it will save all of this information into a file in relatively plain and simple English, all neatly annotated, that you can either email to a support professional or view yourself in a web browser. So you're doing something on screen, but you want to know what's going on in the background. And the Problem Steps Recorder will help show you exactly what it is that's going on in the background. It doesn't provide an exhaustive list of everything that's happening. We'll look at how you can get that. But it does give you information on all the things you're actually doing. Now, I mentioned a little earlier that one of the biggest causes of problems in Windows is device drivers. I don't know if you're looking at the same slide I am, where the image seems to have jumped up the screen, but there you go. Now, device drivers in Windows can cause all sorts of problems for many reasons. One of those reasons is that not all drivers have been certified by Microsoft, a process called digital signing. Now, the reason for this is that Microsoft charge for this process, and this process certifies that driver is compatible with Windows. Not all hardware manufacturers either want to pay it or can afford it, especially when you've got a lot of different drivers that you need to have certified. So there can be all sorts of clashes. You never know how one bit of hardware and its driver is going to interact with another bit of hardware and its driver. The Windows ecosystem is just too large. But there are ways of fixing drivers. Now here we can see, look at some of those ways. If you right click on a driver, then you've got a little menu that will appear, including uninstalling that driver, disabling that driver, and bringing up its properties. If you bring up its properties, then you may have an option there to update. You will have an option to update it, which may not work. It'll look on Windows Update, but it may not find something. You may have an option to roll it back. If that driver has been updated, perhaps through Windows Update, then you can roll it back to the previous version if it's causing problems. And if you uninstall the driver, if you remove the driver, for some drivers, but not all, you'll see here where it says number 2, there's a little tick box to also delete the driver from your hard disk. Now, why should you do this? Well, you should do this because if a driver is causing problems, the next time Windows comes to automatically install the driver, it'll say, oh look, I downloaded this driver, this is a new one, and it'll go and try and automatically install the driver that you've just uninstalled because it's the most recent. If you actually delete the driver software for that device, then it's just gone, so Windows can't reinstall it automatically. Then there are all the hidden drivers within Windows as well, and you'll see here in the menu on the top you can see hidden devices in Device Manager, and these can include all manner of things in Windows, all manner of hardware and software device drivers that can cause problems, such as, for instance, the blue screen of death. Last time I talked about the blue screen of death in one of these webcasts, my internet connection crashed and everything suddenly disappeared. So I'll try not to tempt fate, so we won't spend too long on the blue screen of death. Now, sometimes when you see the blue screen of death, your computer will just automatically restart, so you won't get a chance to read it and you won't get to see what's going on. But you can disable this, and you can get a blue screen of death to stop on a blue screen of death until such time as you reset the computer or physically turn it off yourself. And you do this in this boot menu, press F8 before Windows starts to bring up the boot menu and select Disable Automatic Restart on System Failure. And then when you get a blue screen of death, if it doesn't stop on it, it will from that point onwards. So let's have a look at the blue screen of death itself, where an image may not be entirely correct, but you'll see there's 3 parts of the blue screen of death here that I've underlined. The first one is the name of the error, the second one is the stop code for that error, and if appropriate, a service or driver name underneath that. Now these are the things that you should write down on that trusty old pre-computer piece of paper with a pencil or a biro, and you can look these up. You can look these 3 things up, and combined, then it should give you a lot of information about precisely what has caused this blue screen of death. I say combined because the error name could probably cause the error name could probably be caused by a whole host of things, and the error code could also probably be caused by a great many things. So you want to use these things in conjunction to narrow down your search and find out what it is. And in Windows 8, the blue screen of death is changing and is becoming the blue unhappy smiley of death. We will see how much information it gets, but certainly it'll be friendlier to read than this is at the moment. But here you can see these are the 3 bits of information that you need. So, what are these power utilities I told you about then? What are all these things in Windows 7 that will give you all this really in-depth information about what's going on with your computer, your hardware, your drivers, your software, and your copy of Windows? Well, let's have a look at them. The event viewer is extremely useful. Now, as I say here, the event viewer stores details on everything that happens in Windows 7, and you'll see there's a little caveat with everything. Because if your computer suddenly stops and crashes and just restarts, as can happen, then Windows the event viewer may not have time to store this information. So it may not even register that there's been a problem, or it may register that there's been a critical error, and isn't actually able to store any information on what happened. But in the event viewer, you can sort all the errors by different types. You can have serious errors, critical errors. Obviously, they're as bad as they come. That's normally a blue screen of death. And you can view technical information about the error. Now, you can look this up online. You can send the information to technical professionals, and you can, hopefully, this information in the event viewer will give you information that you need in order to be able to solve the problem. You may, for instance, see an error and see immediately with the information that this is associated with a particular driver, because the name will be fairly obvious, or a particular bit of software, because the name will be fairly obvious. So you can see that there's a problem there. Now, one thing you can do with the event viewer is you can automatically attach a task to it. So you can create a little pop-up alert on the screen. You can send an email. Again, there's caveats with this because it doesn't support everything in the event viewer. Or you can automatically run a program. And we'll have a look at one of these programs in a moment. Now, why might you want to automatically attach a task to an event? Well, an error might occur in the background when you aren't even aware that an error has happened. So you may find, for instance, that all of a sudden you can't use your printer, or that your web browser has stopped working. And you weren't using it at the time. You weren't printing anything, or you weren't using your web browser. You just suddenly discovered that you can't use it anymore. So you look through the event viewer, and you'll see that this stop error for this piece of hardware, for instance, actually happened 15 minutes ago, and you didn't spot it because it happened quietly in the background. So what you can do is you can create, for instance, a pop-up alert, and you can have that flash up a message on the screen saying, "Hey Mike, this error has occurred again, stop what you're doing and make notes on exactly what it is you're doing at the moment," or look up in the event viewer to find out what else is going on, or in the resource monitor, for instance, which we'll look at in a minute. Now, I mentioned sending an email and running a program. Now, there's a DOS command that you can run automatically to compile information from the event viewer, which can then be emailed off. Now, you can run this program, webtutil it's called, there's two switches here that I've highlighted, /C to carry out a command and then stop, and /K to carry out a command string, I suppose to say, and then continue. Now, if you want more information on webtutil, again, this is quite complicated. There is a link here, a bit.ly link, E36TXM, and this will take you to full details on the Microsoft support website for the webtutil command, so that you can find out the best way to use it to harvest information out of the event viewer and save it in a file. So there are lots of other tools as well. Now, Microsoft provide on their website, for instance, the sysinternals suite. Now, the sysinternals suite, as I say here, is a collection of tools and utilities for troubleshooting and auditing Windows computers. They're not part of Windows, but they're useful additional tools, very useful. There's a whole host of them. If you're an IT pro, or if you're knowledgeable about computers, there's all sorts of things in here that can keep you amused for days. Lots and lots of lovely little tools in the sysinternal suite. And then we come on to the performance and information tools in Windows 7 itself. Now, you access these from the Start Menu search box, also from within the control panel, and there's a great deal of information that you can get here. You'll see you've got the event viewer is here, the performance monitor is here, the resource monitor, the Windows 7 task manager, and more, and system health report that we'll look at at the end. So let's go through some of these. Now, the performance monitor can give you live information on stuff that's happening with your computer, and it can show you as a graph what's happening. So you can see here that we have a graph showing us our processor usage here as a red line. Now at the toolbar along the top, you've got, as I've highlighted here, you've got the plus and the remove, you've got the add and the remove buttons, and you can add additional metrics to this graph that you can watch in real time, such as your network activity, such as your memory usage, and there are a great many very, very specific items that you can add to performance information tools to get the information that you need about what precisely is happening in the background. This sort of thing comes in handy where you might suspect that your network connection is dying, for instance, or that a piece of software is using far too much memory or processor time. And this is where the resource monitor can give you huge volumes of additional information. Now, the resource monitor, bring this up. Resource monitor has collapsible panels on the in its main view that can show you details on your an overview of your computer, your processor, your memory, your disk usage, your network usage. But it breaks it down into each one down into really useful categories, and the amount of information that's in here is huge. It's just enormous. So if you suspect, for instance, as I mentioned, that a piece of software is using too much memory or too much processor time, but you don't know what it is, you can actually go into the CPU or the memory tab, and you can open this before the problem occurs, like when you start your computer, and you can keep an eye on it, and it will show you both with numeric information in the main panel, but also with graphs on the right-hand side, and you can see exactly what driver, what piece of software, what Windows component, or whatever else may be causing the problem. You can see exactly what it is that is slowing your computer down or causing a problem. So if something is using all your processor time, you'll be able to look in the resource monitor here and say, yep, I can see it's exactly that's causing the problem. So that's extremely useful. Then there is system information. Now, system information, it doesn't give you information about what's really happening at the time, but it does give you a tremendous amount of really detailed information about your computer generally. Now, this includes all your hardware and all the drivers, but it also includes any installed software that you've got, where things are located, and there's an awful lot of useful information here that you can wade through if you're looking in detail for a problem. But the system health report brings this all together into a handy view for you. Now, when you run a system health report, it takes all of the information that I've talked about so far, all the system information, all the resource information, everything that's going on, and it compiles this into a handy file, again, that you can email or that you can view on your computer, and there will literally be hundreds of pages of information in this, but just like the resource viewer, all the panels in this will be collapsible, so it's easy to see what it is you want to be looking at, because everything is easily marked and clearly identified and labeled, so that you can see exactly what it is that's going on. And if you're familiar with PowerShell, which is a scripting language in Windows 7, then there is a PowerShell command here to automatically run a system health report, so that you could, for instance, have this as a PowerShell script with an icon on your desktop or on another user's desktop. So they suspect that a problem is occurring, such as, let's say, for instance, they get a pop-up message in the event viewer that's been set, and you can run this PowerShell script, and it will automatically generate this file for you. And there's a link here, there's another bit.ly link here down the bottom for full information on how to use PowerShell, because it is new, to generate a system health report. So these are the basics of how we diagnose and repair difficult problems. These are the tools that we need in order to be able to diagnose them. Now, what these will give us are ways to be able to identify what the problem is. There are going to be many different ways to rectify the problem, depending on what it is. If it's a piece of software that's causing a problem, then uninstalling it, reinstalling it perhaps in compatibility mode, or running it in XP mode. If it's an older bit of software, that might fix the problem. If it's a driver, then rolling back to the previous version of that driver, and then hiding the next this faulty one in Windows Update, which you can do by right-clicking on it in Windows Update and selecting Hide Update. That might solve the problem. If it's a faulty Windows component, then it might be a DLL file, a library file that you can find a copy of that on your Windows 7 install disk if you've been sent one, and then you can copy that back across to Windows. Or you may find that you've got something consuming too much processor time or too much memory, and you can identify what it is. So these are the ways that we can get through this by either a process of elimination, as I showed you at the beginning, with the safe boot mode, or by actually looking at what's going on at the time. Or you can use a combination of these. Let's say, for instance, that you suspect it's a problem with Windows itself. Well, you can use safe boot mode to boot into an environment where your drivers are loaded but none of your software is, and you can then run the resource monitor, and you can see what Windows is doing when you're just using bits and pieces in Windows, say opening and closing a few windows in Windows 7 itself. So these tools are all used in conjunction with one another. So that's it for diagnosing and repairing problems. There are a whole series of these webcasts that I'm doing up until June that are already arranged. Next month, on February 2nd, is using virtualization in Windows 7, as you can see here. Then we've got building a bomb-proof backup strategy in March, manually removing viruses and malware from Windows 7 in April, building and modifying a new PC, or an existing PC in May, and managing family safety in Windows 7 in June. And then there'll be more on Windows 7, and of course we'll have webcasts about Windows 8 towards the end of the year. Now, if you want to keep up to date and keep in touch, then here's how you can do it. My website is thelongclimb.com. You can look me up on Facebook, Halsey Mike, or Twitter, Mike_Halsey. Everything goes through those three portals, my website, which has had a recent Metro makeover, so I hope you like it, Facebook and Twitter. I'm also available on LinkedIn, and I have an open mailbag, and I do try and answer as many as I can, but I do apologise, I don't always succeed. Christmas got in the way with some. You can email me at mike@mvps.org, and so occasionally that bounces back, but if it does bounce back to you, then just send it again. But I do encourage you to stay in touch, stay up to date. Hopefully you've been posting lots of questions, so we'll get through as many as we can in the next quarter of an hour. Any that I can't answer, I'm sure will be sent on to me, and I'll write them up as articles, and then you can see them on The Long Climb later on in a few days' time. So, Catherine, what do we have for questions?
Hi, Mike. We do have quite a few questions. And before I jump into them, I wanted to ask you, everyone is asking if they could get a copy of your slides. And I forgot to ask you, do you make those available on your site, or?
I can do. Do you want to, have you got, you've got a copy there, haven't you? So do you have somewhere you can upload them to, or shall I upload them myself and send you a link?
Well, I think Yasmina, who isn't here today, has a copy of the slides, but I can download them from our site and post them on SlideShare if people would like to get them there. And,
yeah, let's do that. What I'll do is I'll email them to you again now anyway, just so you've got an updated copy, because I have moved one slide, so I'll email it to you again now. But yes, that's, I'm more than happy to let people have a copy of the slides.
All right. So do you want me to read the questions to you? Is that how you like to do it?
Yeah. Well, what do we got?
Okay. So back when you were talking about safe boot mode, Jason asked, and some people jumped in and answered this, but he asked, do you need to use a grounding wire strap to be properly earthed, or is touching the power supply with it off but plugged in good enough?
I would recommend using the grounding wire, but other people don't think it's completely necessary. I would always recommend, being as safe as possible and following all the rules, but many people believe it's not strictly necessary.
Okay, great. And then, let's see, Jerry asked, we had a couple questions when you were talking about Windows repair. Jerry asked, is there any kind of repair that might run in the Windows shell to bypass encrypted disk issues?
Not that I'm aware of. If you've got a disk encryption is always a tricky subject. If you're using EFS, encrypted file system in Windows, for instance, then you can get all manner of problems that can corrupt your files, and I don't recommend anybody use EFS at all. If you're using BitLocker and you have a problem with BitLocker, then you should probably really hope to have a backup, which is what I'm dealing with in March. So it's next month, dealing with him in it's in March. So yeah, encrypted disk problems they're difficult.
Okay. Then James had another question also when you talked about Windows repair. He said that startup repair resets components to the default state. Does that mean that it will reinstall OS components if they're corrupt?
No. Windows 8 will do that. Windows 7 doesn't. What Windows 7 does is if you like, it keeps a backup of what the boot files were when you installed Windows. So if you've got a dual boot system, then it'll know and it'll have a backup of that. And pretty much all it'll do is just copy the backup back. It's not very clever. It won't intelligently look to get something off the DVD, for instance.
Okay. And then David asked, can BootRec rebuild a virus-infected MBR such that it can be considered to be clean from the virus?
In theory, yes. There's no reason why it can't. Yes, I think in theory, yes. But I'd always, if you can, it's not always possible. If you have something like a USB hard disk enclosure, for instance, and you can put that hard disk into that enclosure and plug it in via USB into another computer, it's always advisable to check that hard disk thoroughly. Because if you never know if you've downloaded inadvertently some malware that's corrupted your own copy of Windows or your own antivirus software, and it may still be infected when you're being told that things are clean. So always try and check it with another computer. But bootrec it just recreates the file. So if you've got a corrupt master boot record, for instance, then bootrec it'll delete it and it'll replace it. So in theory, yes. In practice, new types of malware are appearing all the time.
Okay, that's good to know. And then Jason asked another question. Does the Scan OS recognize non-Windows operating systems?
It should do, yes.
It should do. Okay, great.
Yes.
And then a question a lot of people asked. You mentioned videos on the Microsoft.com site, and people couldn't find them.
Right.
The Scan Now video?
What I'll do is I'll send you a link to send out to people.
Okay.
I'll send a link through to that. But it's on support.microsoft.com. In the Windows 7 section, there's a link on the side for troubleshooting videos, but I will send you a link.
Okay. All right. So, okay, good. I think, Greg posted something else. Okay, watching the chat room too. And then let me see. We have a lot of questions here. So Kathy asked, is there any point to running System File Checker or other startup repair options as a preventative or housekeeping routine? And she said that she's of the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset, and she wonders what your thoughts are on that.
First of all, hi Kathy, if you're the Kathy I think you are. There are people who would run the System File Checker periodically, maybe once every 6 months or once a year as a preventative measure. It certainly can't do any harm. If you have a bit of free time, if you have a Slipstreamed install DVD, then it can be a beneficial thing to do, because you never know if there might be something, a little used file in the somewhere in your hard disk that has that's corrupt in some way.
Okay, and Kathy says yes, that is she. All right, and then let me see. Kendra's asking, if you delete some drivers, will it mess up the other drivers? I know I'm always afraid to do that. So.
No, if you do it through the device manager and delete drivers that way, then it won't. It'll only affect that driver. The only time it will affect other drivers is if they're dependent on one another. Let's say, for instance, you have a television tuner card. That will probably have 3 or 4 different drivers. It'll have one for the sound component, one for the tuning component, one for the display component. So if they're dependent on one another, yes, it can.
Okay.
But other than that, probably not.
If they are dependent, will you get some kind of warning, or
if they are dependent on one another, and you remove one, you'll probably find that the others automatically disappear anyway.
Ah, okay.
Because you are essentially removing a device, and if you remove 1/3 of a device, the rest of it won't show up either.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. And then Yuri is asking. He said that performance monitors have a lot of counters, and which of them are most useful? I'm not sure.
Primarily the ones to do with your input-output on your network card, for any internet communications as well, for your memory usage, and for the processor. The internet one can be very useful if you're let's say you're having problems with your internet connection, as I always seem to do during these webcasts, and you want to see exactly what's going on because you're dealing with the tech support people over the phone, and you're trying to describe to them what's going on, and you can say, well, I'm looking at what is exactly going on my computer, and just after 7 o'clock every day, it's disappearing off.
All
so
right.
those are the ones that are most useful.
Okay, my group chat also is stalling, so I know we have a bunch of questions. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. Hold on. You can still hear me, right?
I can hear you. Hopefully everyone else can.
Fortunately,
so many questions. We're onto a second screen.
Computers, you got to love them. Okay, so Anthony was asking if this is going to be recorded, and I guess he joined late. So yes, everyone who asked, we are recording this, and it will be available within 24 to 48 hours, I think. And we'll make sure that everyone gets. We'll send you a link to that. So let me see. Here's a question: Can SFC? This is from Seth. Can SFC be run from Windows 7 repair disk created in the backup restore applet in the control panel?
No.
No.
It can only be run from within Windows. It's really annoying. You can't run it from a Windows rescue disk because it is one of the most useful things in Windows, and it's really hamstrung by the fact that you can only run it from within Windows itself. It's annoying, and I really hope Microsoft fixed that for Windows 8.
So you don't know yet if it's been fixed in Windows 8?
I don't know if it's been fixed. Give it a month. I might also be able to give you the answer to that question.
All right. And let me see. Other questions. Okay, and someone's asking about the free ebook on the long climb. Is that?
Yes, if you go to thelongclimb.com, my Windows 7 Power Users Guide, it's a 170-page free ebook. Click on the books link, which you'll see on the right-hand side, and you'll see it listed in there. Okay.
These questions keep jumping by me. There were a couple more I want to get to. Okay, my computer screen would just slow down. So next screen. All right. Okay, where was the free ebook? And actually, I think we may have. Okay, how to read the dump file. Let's see. I'm sorry, Greg. That keeps jumping by me. I know.
Don't worry. If there are any questions that we haven't been able to get through, then everyone's free to email me, post them on the Facebook page, email me at mike@mvps.org, and I always, as I say, I always answer as many as I can, even if the answer is have a look at this extensive link on the Microsoft Support website, especially the one that's got my videos on it.
Okay, so here is one more from Fanny, who got an all-in-one printer, and oh gosh, it's just Fanny, I'm sorry. My Window's acting up, and I just can't freeze it. It keeps jumping around. So forgive me. I think we'll send the rest of the questions to Mike. And Mike, fantastic presentation. I want to thank you again. People have asked me to leave the chat room open for a few minutes, so I'm going to do that. I think they want to copy the information in the chat room. We had a great discussion today. And
cool.
So
one of these days the chat room will work for me.
We'll get it working or die trying, I swear. No, we'll have it working next time. All right, so I think it was another great webcast, and I'll look forward to our next one next month.